meeting for Monday, August 1st, 2022, 5:30 PM. Let's call a roll.
Evans? Here. Janser? Olson?
Here.
Pittner?
Here.
Pajagula? Pajagula? Pajagula?
Hello. Yes.
Ross?
Here.
Striley?
Here.
Janser?
All right, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Leading us today in the Pledge of Allegiance is the members of Engine 1. If you want to step forward to the podium.
Where do you want us, right here?
Right there.
Yes, sir.
Good, clear instructions.
There you go.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Janser here. Want to check? Mark, Janser, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Moving on to the mayor's report, since the last meeting, what I have is meetings with area legislators, had several of those, a couple of flood protection meetings, spent some time out at the North Dakota State Fair helping Renee and her team pull off a successful fair event. And then today I attended a longtime retired Ward County Sheriff, Vern Erk's funeral at Bethany Lutheran Church. In addition, we do have a special recognition today for a minor firefighter. Every first responder knows that there will be a time in their life when they are tested. They expect it when they're on the job, but not when they're on vacation. Scott Allen of the Minot Fire Department recently passed that test. Scott and his family were on vacation in California in early July among a group of 9 people floating down the American River near Citrus Heights. Han, and I'm going to butcher the last name, who is married to Scott's brother-in-law, went for a quick swim when the group stopped its raft at a small island. She quickly realized that she was in trouble, and as the current took her away from her group, in a letter to the Minot Fire Department, she wrote, "I started panicking when I felt my muscles giving up and I couldn't swim anymore. The river was full of people rafting that day, but I don't think one realized that I was waving for help. However, Scott saw the danger I was in and immediately jumped in the water. Scott swam out to her, but the current was too strong for him to get the 2 of them back to the raft, so Scott pulled both of them to a small rock where they hung on until a group brought the raft and pulled them back on board. Thanks to Scott's awareness and quick reaction, things didn't get any worse for me that day. I would like to give Scott recognition for his courage. So would we. Scott, on behalf of the City of Minot and the Office of the Mayor, I congratulate you on your heroic efforts that day. We're never surprised when our first responders rush to aid in need, but we're always amazed. Thank you, Scott, for your courage, dedication, and sacrifice you show every day on the job here in our community and when you're on vacation. Thank you for reminding us that a first responder is truly never off duty. So, Scott, I've got a coin for you.
I think it'd be cool. Can they hear us?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do.
Hold on a minute.
Concludes my report. Let's move on to the city manager's report.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I have included the city manager memo and report within the packet. Be happy to answer any questions, but if there's not any questions, I'll be doing plenty of talking later on in the end of the meeting, so I'll save my comments for that time.
Any questions? Thank you. Moving on to item number 5, city attorney report.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I also submitted a written report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I like how you've isolated the month now. You know, like July and like, because it makes it easier to read. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Nothing of the attorney. Moving on to item number 6, consent. We have 21 items on the consent agenda. Is there any that need to be pulled? Any? What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval on all of the items.
Second. Moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Pittner. Any discussion? If not, call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Striley,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Moving on to action items. 7.1, municipal court recommendation. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Moved by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pittner. Any discussion? Any questions? Any discussion? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just if anyone didn't have the opportunity to look at it, we were part of several conversations in the possibility of moving municipal court, and we had good conversation and dialogue with Ward County, and they certainly did their due diligence in trying to find a location for us. In the end, it's probably not the right location, and I think it just means that we have to continue to look at other options. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that a lot of effort had been put into this, and even though this is the decision tonight, I know we'll be looking at it again in the future.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Gary?
Perhaps the city manager can answer this, or Chief Klug. You noted that you're currently developing a space analysis and feasibility study for the RFP. When, can you give me like timing on that? And I'm referring to, for folks who maybe didn't, the space analysis for this space when everything here moves over to the new space.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilwoman Evans, my plan is to have the RFP or RFQ out in the next week. I would imagine it'll probably be ready to come back to council the first meeting in September. That's my hope anyway.
Okay, and that's just really like hiring an entity that's competent, right, to come in and sort of figure out, you know, what space you need, what space other entities like municipal court may need, if this is anyhow workable, right, to meet those needs, so we can sort of know how to proceed.
Yeah. Mayor Ross, Alderwoman Evans, our hope is that we can outline, I guess, do a space analysis, see what our needs are, and then check the feasibility of how does our operation fit in this space when it's vacated by City Hall, and see if what that looks like and what their recommendation is. Hopefully they can give, is it feasible to I guess, design this building into a police department, or would it be more cost effective to look at an alternate option?
Last questions were, so are we gonna do it so that if like their conclusion is it's not feasible, that they would offer some recommendations? Or would we then have to go about that process after they come back and say it's not feasible?
Yeah, Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, I'm not sure what that looks like. I've met with one firm that was in town. They knew that City Hall was going to vacate. We did a quick walkthrough, and we really didn't get into much discussion beyond that. I would suppose that a lot of that would depend on if that was something that we wrote into the RFP or into that whole process, then yes, maybe they could come back and say, we wouldn't recommend this, we would recommend this. So I think that's something I could explore as I'm putting some of those details into that process.
Mr. City Manager, would that be, I'm thinking cost-wise, right? If we're going to be doing a big contract, right, for a space analysis, adding that additional thing about, if not A, then what would B and C be?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, my recommendation is that we hire a consulting firm. We did budget $50,000 in this fiscal year towards that, and the plan was to budget another $50,000 in next fiscal year, which we'll have a presentation on here later this evening. But yeah, and talking about this with Chief Klug, my recommendation would be is that we have a consultant come in, assess the space needs of the police department and the municipal court, and then assess this building about whether or not that will fit, and if so, how, and then if not, what are some alternatives that we should explore with potentially some recommendations of other locations or sites or alternatives that can be considered. Ultimately, an RFP, it'll depend on whether that comes in budget and whether that's too much of a scope of service with what we have budgeted or not. But that's my recommendation on how we proceed.
Thank you. That's all I had, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Striley?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Moving on to 7.2, the 2025 North Dakota Department of Transportation Alternatives Washington Elementary Safe Routes to School. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Moved by Pittner. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Striley. Any discussion? Questions?
No,
Carrie.
no question, no discussion. I just wanted to, thank Lance and his crew. I sat on the committee that chose the companies for these two safe school routes, and it was, it was a great process, and we had 3 good companies, who all would have been great and doing good work, and I'm glad we're moving forward with these 2 projects, and yeah, taking some load off of engineering and the shortage over there so they can work on some other projects. So, good stuff.
Thank you, Carrie. Anything else? Not call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Striley?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
7.3, the 2024 North Dakota Department of Transportation Alternatives Design Edison Elementary Safe Routes to School. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Moved by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Janser. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Striley?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Moving on, 7.4, resolution, agreement, and partial release of lien. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Moved by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pittner. Any discussion? Any questions? Any discussion?
Oh my goodness, I feel like a big chatterbox today. Kelly, could you just take a second to, your memo was really good, but just for people listening and stuff, just the very 25,000 foot, like what this is and why we're doing it and that kind of thing.
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, last summer the city had a jury trial with Cypress Development LLC, and the judgment, or the finding was in favor of the city in the amount of just over $2.4 million. And so the city received a judgment in that amount. So we have a judgment lien on a parcel of property owned by Cypress Development LLC, which is close to the Carnegie Center and the old YMCA properties. And So approval of this agreement would approve a transaction where the city would be paid $330,000, which is the assessed value of that parking lot. In exchange, the city would agree to release the judgment lien against that parcel of property only. The city would still be able to pursue collection activities with regard to the remainder of the judgment, but it would just resolve the lien on as to that property. And then there would be an exchange of some money.
Thank you for that.
Any other discussion, questions? Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Striley?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Moving on to 7.5, ordinance repealing section 1-12, authorizing to remove certain public records of chapter 1 general provisions. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Move approval, was that Paul? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Roscoe. Any discussion? Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll bring this up. This was brought forth from myself and Alderman Padragula at the direction of staff. I think it benefits and limits liability for the city of Minot going forward, that personnel records shall remain with the city and in their entirety and not have the ability to have anything removed. I think it's property of the city, and it protects the city going forward. So I'll support this item.
Any other comments? Call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Striley?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
7.6, fire engine motor replacement. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Moved by Pittner,
So moved.
I'll second it.
second, okay, moved by Janser, seconded by Paul. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just what's the process on this? If you look at the background on this, looks like this was done quite a few months ago and now coming, basically asking for forgiveness to pay this bill. Shouldn't it be the other way? I mean, if you know this engine's there, why wouldn't it have been done in May or June before coming? I mean, it's already completed, it's done. Now just say, well, we're, approve something that we've already done. It seems to me that's the reverse of what should happen.
Mayor, Alderman Striley, when we brought it in, we weren't sure the extent of the damage that was done to the engine. Found out that we couldn't rebuild it. We had to have a whole new one purchased, and it took a long time to get the engine, as well as getting it installed and everything else, and we weren't even sure the cost. It's hard to get costs right now because everything is all over the map. They might give you one quote and then you get it back and it's completely different. So we went and looked at our budget, and because it took so long, we were really down in our maintenance budget. And this is kind of an anomaly. We don't normally have to replace motors within the engines, but they're very expensive. So that's what happened.
Anything else? Thank you, Chief. Any other comments, questions? If not, call the roll.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Striley?
No.
Evans?
Yes.
Moving on to Section 8, this is personal appearances. Anybody who has comments or questions or wants to speak to the council as a whole, now is your time. Please state your name and city of residence.
Excuse me, Eric Popnica, city resident in Minot here. I'm here representing Central Power Electric Cooperative in conjunction with XL Energy on one of our projects that we are working on completing for the city of Minot.
Okay, is this, we have that on the agenda? We added an agenda item? Yeah, I put it at 9.2. 9.2, so actually it's next.
Excellent.
Okay.
My apologies.
No, my apologies for not bringing that up to your attention earlier. Oh, we could do that too. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Aldermen and Alderwomen of the Council, I'm Justin Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Minot Area Council of the Arts. As a receiver of modest amount of funds from the city, I just wanted to come here tonight and personally invite you. We are about to wrap up our summer concert series. This Thursday is our grand finale, featuring music from Johnny Spud and Soulshine, plus we have food trucks, arts vendors, bounce houses, axe throwing. Open to all ages, and it's a lot of fun. That's this Thursday evening. Everything starts at 5:30, and the music starts at 6. So I hope to see some, if not all of you there, and anyone, of course, who's in here listening, please join us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Maca. I mean, the summer programming has been amazing between Oak Park and Main Street. I mean, the variation in music, the different, audiences and demographics that are attending. I've been to like both in the park and, then you had to relocate to Roosevelt Park for a couple of weeks, and your team and volunteers, have done an amazing job in providing like some really solid programming free programming for our community this summer. So thank you.
Anyone else? I wonder if we should move 9.2 up, which is the central power issue, if we want to.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Second, moved by Pittner, second by Lisa. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 9.2,
Aye.
Central Power Electric Cooperative email correspondence discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. I'm here this evening just to discuss a matter that I had emailed yourself and the council on earlier this morning, and that's in regards to a substation expansion that we're working in cooperation with Xcel Energy on the eastern part of Minot, just off 72nd Street Southeast. Derek, I think, I'm just going to go through, thank you, Derek. Kind of a brief, real short overview of the project itself, its location. Derek, if you would advance it to the next. Thank you. This shows existing today what is owned by Xcel Energy here, notated by Northern States Power Company. It's an approximate 4.5 acre site. That actually, as I pointed out in my email, is most of that equipment was placed and put in service in the early 70s. And we are working in cooperation with Xcel Energy now. Central Power is there via agreement. Xcel Energy owns the site. By nature of what needs to be done at the site, we needed to expand it and purchase additional property to the west and to the south of the site. Derek, if you would advance to the next one, please. This shows some of, in green, you'll see Central Power's overhead transmission lines that exit the site. And the other various ones that come in and out of are Xcel Energy, Basin Electric, and Western Area Power. Some of the ones that aren't shown on this diagram are the underground facilities by Verendery Electric Cooperative and Xcel Energy. Derek, if you advance, please. This shows a plan that we would like to work with Xcel that we have submitted to the city, including our stormwater management plan that has been approved. Our grading plan has been approved to move. It is our intention to go to construction later on this month in August. If you look at this, the northerly portion you can see just in the very center where it is cut off is what is existing in the site. The southern part is the expansion, which would include the new control building and other necessary central power equipment. And south of that, you can see the water detention pond as part of our stormwater management plan. Derek, if you'd advance, please. This shows the existing control building and some of the substation steel equipment that exists on the site today. Next, please, Derek. This shows our typical control building that we would replace that older one that you just saw in the previous slide. Derek, please advance. This shows the site looking from the south back towards the north of the existing site today. It's an agricultural field that abuts the existing property. Next, please. This shows in the same location, just looking south. You can see the overhead transmission facilities in the background. Next, please, Derek. This is in the same spot, just looking directly west in the proposed area of the expansion. Next, please, Derek. This is the original outlot plat that I had submitted, and I referred to in my email earlier today. That was submitted to Mr. Van Dyke and the Planning Department in April of 2021. At that point, we had done a preliminary survey, as you can see here. The existing part of the site to the south, or excuse me, the expanded portion is what we would need to expand the substation site in order to put our facilities there and remove our facilities further from Excel's current facilities at the site. The portion on the west, I guess the upper portion of the L leg of our proposed outlot plat originally was for stormwater management grading, and also it was a relatively useless part of the existing landowner's property. At that point, I had initiated a DRT meeting with the planning and zoning with Mr. Van Dyke, Mr. Baumgartner, and Mr. Billingsley. We discussed, I believe, engineering. I believe Emily was there from engineering too. We discussed the parameters of the project. At that time, one of the main concerns was that the zoning as a whole for the city was going to be redone, revamped, to streamline the process and whatnot. And so Mr. Van Dyke advised me at that time that at some point over the coming months, it was likely that the parameters that we were talking about that day were going to change, which is fine. The challenge for Central Power and other entities are on a higher level agreement. We have to enter into interconnection and interfacility agreements with them that could put us out longer than the timeline that was being advanced for when the zoning process could change. So in the next 4 months, I could start the process of a different plan. However, by the time that the city adopted that plan, we may not have an agreement with Xcel Energy that could be completed. So at that point, along with Mr. Van Dyke was not favorable to an outlot plat as was proposed here. So at that point, I decided to wait. We decided to wait until it looked like the city was going to adopt a different zoning ordinance. And in December of 21, I went back and had another DRT meeting. Derek, if you advance, please. So this will show the plan that was advanced at that time. So at that time, it was decided upon. I had gone back to the owner, who we had originally decided that he would sell to Central Power a 5.68 acre parcel for us to expand the substation. At that point, it was decided upon that in order to keep agricultural zoning and not go to a public zoning, that it would have to be a 10-acre site minimum for Lot 1, which would accommodate our newly purchased property from the landowner and Xcel's current 4.32 approximate acre site, which would be a 10-acre total site. That time I was advised that the 10 acres would actually not have to be the site size, that would have to be post right-of-way dedication. So I went back to the adjoining landowner, who was probably at that time getting tired of seeing me, and said, I need to purchase additional property. And that was to get over the 10-acre minimum requirement. And also, at that time, we were notified that in Lot 1, that you can see on this diagram, and Lot 2, that right-of-way dedication for the roadway would have to be dedicated both on the Lot 1 that we were developing and also on the undeveloped portion of that Lot 2, which the landowner is retaining, which gave us obviously a little bit of consternation because it turned a $55,000 approximate parcel purchase into an $87,000 parcel purchase because we had to purchase additional property to not only expand to the 10-acre point, but also to give away 2.59 acres for right-of-way dedication. That's difficult to accept. However, that was what it was. We made it through the process. The Planning Commission approved it. The City Council here approved the plan. The plat was approved and recorded. At that point, I took the deed, which was agreed upon by Central Power and the adjoining landowner, for the balance of Lot 1, which Xcel did not own, in which Central Power had the agreement with the adjoining landowner to own, to expand the site. I took that to the Ward County Courthouse. The recorder said that she was unable to record it, excuse me, because it would be splitting that outlot, or splitting that lot. Derek, if you would advance it, please, to the next screen. This is a description. There was nothing that Central Power had done or I had done that was what I would consider out of order, or that I was trying to get them to record something that wasn't agreed upon. It was clear from the beginning that we were to own the lot. We are going to convey this parcel to Xcel Energy, who will own Lot 1 in its entirety as the plat shows. There's going to be a period, there was going to be a period in between when Central Power took possession of it by deed and transferred it by closing, which we have a purchase agreement with Xcel right now, to convey this portion, this parcel to them. So they will own all of Lot 1, and we will be there by agreement on the expanded site as we are today. So this is a description of, that I took off our warranty deed that we were conveying, which would be in Section 27, Lot 1 of the Mallard Substation Subdivision, the City of Wyandotte, excuse me, being a portion of the southeast quarter, less the easterly 451 of the northerly 418, which is Xcel's current portion of the southeast quarter, less the dedicated road right-of-way, and less Lot 2. So in other words, Central Power is taking possession of the balance of Lot 1 that was not owned today. We, at this point, have no intent of owning that portion of Lot 1. Our intent, and we are setting up the closing currently to be done by the end of August to convey that parcel to Xcel Energy. So I apologize for the long and convoluted explanation of it. I'm concerned that it's possibly thought or being conveyed that we were doing something that was underhanded or not per regulation. That's not in our intent. We're a good partner to the City of Minot. We have been and will continue to be. We were just trying to carry out the agreement that we had with the landowner, who said that he would sell this portion to Central Power, and Central Power will convey it to Xcel Energy so we can complete our project. So I would like to answer any questions of anyone. Our intent is, if I may, Mayor, that we would be allowed to record this warranty deed, which we entered into, and we have paid the landowner for that parcel. So we have the deed signed and notarized. We have paid him for it, and now we are asking just to record the deed so we are able to transfer that property to Xcel Energy.
Are there any questions, comments? Roscoe?
Thank you. So what's the resolution? What do we need, what's council need to do? The department need to do? Is there, what's the path to get this done? Because obviously this is a critical infrastructure project, needs to be done. It needs approval. What's the process?
Jonathan, do you want to step up?
Mayor Ross, members of the council. So in short, the process to further subdivide the property would be to rezone it to P public and then come back in for a minor plat. So we'll have to go back through the process, go to planning commission, hold public hearings, come to city council, hold another public hearing, and then have a second final reading plus a final plat to further subdivide the property. In summary, just to go over, I guess, the timeline, several DRTs, so these are development review team meetings, occurred and met with Mr. Poppinga in May of 2021. And at that time, he was presented two options. One of them was the P public zone that would allow him to have a sub 10-acre piece of property. The alternative was to keep the agricultural zoning district, but that would come with requiring the minimum 10-acre lot. In December 6th, we did change the subdivision code. The new subdivision code was adopted. However, the change to the subcode did not affect the minimum acreage of agricultural land, and it did not remove the option to move forward with the project as P public zone. Further, staff does not guide applicants on when they should apply, but clearly we can go over what is proposed in the codes, what changes are going to occur, and make sure that they're aware of those changes so that they can make an informed decision on when they want to apply. If they want to apply prior to a code change because it's in their favor, then we welcome that. That's what they're entitled to at the time of application. However, if we're changing something that might be in their favor after a text amendment, then they simply wait to apply once that text amendment is done. That's happened multiple times for different developments since I've been here. January 5th, a second development review team meeting was held. The applicant had decided to move forward with a 10-acre property and keep the zoning as ag. So we held the pertinent meetings that were necessary, and ultimately a final plat was approved by City Council on June 20th of this year. So if you want to bring up attachment A that I provided to you, Derek. So this is that plat. What was applied for is 2 lots, one of them being 10 acres and then the remainder of Mr. Berg's property. We have owners, we have Xcel Energy, representation of Xcel Energy, Central Power, and Mr. Berg all signing the application desiring to create 2 lots. That's what was presented to City Council. That was ultimately what was approved. And then subsequent to this, I received a call that stated that if I can just permit Mr. Papinga to subdivide the property, if the recorder has this, I guess, verbal blessing from myself, then they can move forward. And I just want to call out to Ward County recorders for doing exactly what they're there to do, and so we appreciate that. But Section 10.2-1, methods of sub. So this is A, intent. It shall be unlawful for any person who is the owner or agent of an owner of any land within the city of Minot, in short, to divide outside of the major or minor subdivision plat process. There is nothing I can do as a administrator of this code that would allow them to subdivide. All subdivisions must go through City Council through the proper application procedures. That's how we make sure everything is on the up and up. All I see is the Xcel Energy and Mr. Berg signed off on the plat, and then I can't then just make a determination that it should be subdivided in 3 ways instead of 2 ways. That seems like that's likely to cause more issues than solve. So my response to Mr. Papinga was that I have no authority to grant a subdivision outside of the process. He would like to work with the other 2 property owners that are part of this transaction to resolve the issue. That's really his only course of action. As an example, we did have, looking at Slim Chickens. Slim Chickens wanted to purchase a piece of property from a neighboring property owner, the church. We approved the plat and they went about their business. They figured out how to accommodate that transaction and they moved forward and got it done. We're not party to the transaction side of things. We do evaluate lots and how they work with the rest of the neighboring properties and whether or not they meet our codes, but we don't get into the nit and gritty of the transaction itself. So going back to it, a public zone amendment request for the 2 pieces of property, and then a minor plat would be the only path forward to align with the land development ordinance.
Carrie?
Just a question for Kelly. I mean, I'm assuming that is the correct legal interpretation, right? That with the land development ordinance, right? This is that they'd have to go back and start that process.
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, yeah, for city purposes, in order to subdivide and rezone a process, it does have, or a property, it has to go through Planning Commission and the City Council.
Okay, so starting, okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just to comment, Mr. Van Dyke commented on the private side of this, those transactions. I can't speak to that. I don't think any city staff knows what those relationships are or what their agreements say, but there may be a solution there, like Mr. Van Dyke indicated. That would be up for the parties to figure out, though.
And those 2 things could go concurrently too, right? Like, you know, working on a new, right? Like talking with the existing property owners, not you, but them, and trying to work something out, and then perhaps initiating the process all over again for a P designation.
Correct. Mayor Ross, Alderwoman Evans, if we're happy to work with the applicant if that's the route that they need to take, we'll guide them through that process.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Mayor,
Roscoe.
that still doesn't solve the problem where this doesn't probably get built this year, correct? I mean, can you build it? Probably not.
Not if we have to go back through the process.
So there's no, I mean, it's just a no. I mean, we've already approved the design the way it is. Obviously, it's a little bit different here with this public zone, but I mean, there's no waivers, there's no motion we can make to suspend. I mean, to me, this, can we grant them temporary to start construction, or is it just dead in the water? And sorry.
So the issue here at hand is the ordinances that are on the books that previous councils have given staff to follow, and staff is following what council has directed. So if I understand correctly, what we have here is we have a piece of property that's zoned agricultural, and the minimum lot size for agricultural property is 10 acres, correct?
That's correct.
And so the city doesn't really care who owns what parcels of property or what name it's in. The challenge is they're going through their agreement, they're divvying up this 10-acre parcel into smaller parcels, so they no longer meet the minimum requirement for ag. There is an avenue forward. Staff has processed what was applied for. That was leaving it zoned agricultural, which, as has been indicated by both parties, both understood that there was a minimum 10-acre requirement for that. I'm not sure where the breakdown happened, that when it went to be recorded, and it looked like on the previous presentation that this is going to be recorded as about a 6.2 acre parcel, but that does not meet the agricultural designation. There is an alternative, as staff has presented, that it can be done as a public zone, but that has to go through a rezoning process because we have different minimum lot size requirements underneath a public zone. I think what Mr. Van Dyke is stating is the owners can figure out whatever relationship they want to be able to maintain it as a 10-acre parcel and still move forward with what's been approved by the city. But that's the decision of the applicant. If they want to record it as a smaller than 10-acre parcel by city ordinance, we are required to maintain a minimum lot size of 10 acres. But I'm not aware of any ability of the council to simply waive the rules on the books. You can change the rules on the books if you want, but that also takes time and process. But it's staff's responsibility to abide by and execute the ordinances that the council has given direction to staff.
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. Brief, or kind of, I guess, what would be the timeline if they were to start this process over? Weeks, months?
So, Mayor Ross, Alderwoman Olson, so today is the application deadline for the September Planning Commission meeting. Likely, if we know that we're going to get everything tomorrow morning, we could still accept an application. We're looking at probably mid-October by the time this would be completed.
Okay.
Is it the quickest for a rezone and then the minor plat?
Thank you.
Anything, I'm not sure what action we can take, if any.
We can just duly note.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Mayor Ross, if I may, just
Yes.
one additional point. There's probably some confusion why I wouldn't just apply for public zoning in the first place or during the process of when we discussed it. There are two major reasons for that. Number one was the public zoning has stronger or more stringent ordinances as far as screening and other requirements that aren't conducive to a substation property with overhead transmission lines. So one of the things in public zoning is that we would have to screen most of the property with trees, a wall, something that would be conducive or follow or conform to the public zoning. And with 4 different overhead transmission line entities in there, we can't do that. So that was one of the reasons why we stayed with egg zoning, because they have less stringent ordinances to follow. The second thing is that at that time when we were having the discussion, which was earlier this year, it was noted, and I took note of the fact that without a zoning change, it only goes to the council a single time versus having to have a second reading, which adds more time to our process. So for those reasons, we decided to stay with agricultural, because we were already down that road a long ways, along with the issues with public zoning, and also to go back to the council the second time. So that's why we stayed with the ag zone.
I just don't believe, I think by ordinance, our hands are tied.
I do understand that. I just, you know, the frustrating part is that no part of this changed from the beginning. We were always to purchase the parcel, and I have a very good communication as far as I'm concerned with Mr. Van Dyke, Mr. Baumgartner, the whole planning and engineering staff. We've always had that. But the difficulty here is that I wasn't trying to do anything different than we set out to do in the first place. And that now when we tried to wanted to record the deed and convey that to Excel so they own exactly what they say they own on paper, that's what we're trying to get. I certainly understand the nuances of ordinances and how you would have to rewrite those things and allow it to order it. I was just wondering if perhaps that we would record our deed in succession with the transfer of the property to Excel or something to that effect. However, if that's not acceptable, then I will have to take a different route of communication with the parties involved.
Thank you. Go ahead, Harold.
I do just want to comment that this is not the experience that we want people to have when they're trying to do a project with the city. I first heard about this today when you sent the email to the council, and I was forwarded the email by some of the council members. So this is definitely not the experience that we want to have. Developers, you know, the relationship between the utility companies and the city is important for growth for the future. So this is something that I would like to look further into to see if what caused it. I believe staff was doing their job, and I also believe that you were open and honest with it, but somewhere in there something broke down, and I'm curious to see what that is and what the solution is for the future so we can avoid this situation. So I don't think, at least in my opinion, I don't see anything that Central Power has done wrong in this situation, but obviously the process hasn't worked to bear the result that we want. And this is the reason why we have the DRT meetings, is hopefully to avoid situations like this, and it obviously didn't work in this case. So again, I just want to express our gratitude for your investment into our community, and this is not the experience that we want your company to have with the city of Minot. And I'll be taking a look at it to see if we can figure out a solution better in the future. But in the temporary situation, I don't know that there's a whole lot that I can do, because we either have to maintain a 10-acre parcel or it has to be rezoned another way, and that takes time. So
Understood, and thank you.
Roscoe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and obviously this is probably put on the books a long time ago, but what's the theory behind the 10 acres? What makes that magic?
Ultimately, the planning staff can respond to that. You can come up, John, if you want, but it's a designation of what's the difference between an agricultural, residential, commercial property. Agriculture are bigger spaces. There is some planning methodology based off of history and studies and those kinds of things, but Mr. Van Dyke's probably better qualified to answer that question.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Straley, I think City Manager Stewart, he handled it pretty well, but ultimately the 10-acre piece of property for an agricultural district is small by agricultural use standards. To ensure that ag is actually used for agricultural purposes, you want to make sure you have a minimum lot size that's going to actually be used for that. It's next to impossible to profit as a farm on anything less than 10 acres. And it previously was 20 acres, but we reduced it down to 10 acres. Any more than that, you might as well not call it agriculture.
So, Mr. Mayor, there's no variance we can grant here? I mean, it just is what it is.
So any variance would still have to be applied for and go through the proper process like any other application.
Same 2-3 months?
Correct. And at that May 2021 DRT, the Development Review Team meeting, a variance to some of the standards with regard to landscaping were presented as an option, knowing that there were some practical difficulties with regard to placing trees when there's known overhead power lines there.
What can we do? I mean, this isn't the first time. I mean, I've heard it lots of times, not in this scenario, but just the time that it takes. What can we do to accelerate some of this? To me, 2 readings plus a planning and zoning, I mean, that's just too much bureaucracy, too much time. What can we do in the future to change that and streamline it, make it quicker, more business friendly? Because that's just too long, in my opinion. And it's not this project, it's every project.
Yeah, Mayor Ross, Alderman Straley, I would say involving the public and obtaining input is not a waste of time. It's certainly very valuable to get neighboring property owners' input on the minutia that may be affecting them as a result of a proposed development. It gives a chance for the neighborhood to chime in and guide their immediate surroundings. So if we have to hold a couple public hearings to ensure that the neighbors have a chance to have a voice within the community, I think that's extremely important. And ordinances require 2 readings, a public hearing, and then the second reading. So by the nature of it, it has to come to council twice, and we only hold planning commission once a month. The alternative then, with regard to that, the best we could do is hold planning commission twice a month. That would probably shave a couple weeks off of the process. But I think holding public hearings, inviting the public is an extremely important part of community development.
For sure it is. The planning commission meeting once a month, I mean, can there ever be just a call for the meeting, or it has to be this specific day of this specific month? I mean, to me, if there's projects that need approval, why are we waiting 30 days? And then if you miss this deadline, oh, sorry, you got to wait another month. I mean, to me, that's could be easier, more friendly.
So the meetings need to be spelled out well in advance. Typically adopt the schedule in December of the preceding year for the entire year. I would say when it was held twice a month, I believe it was at some point in the last decade, attendance becomes an issue because it's a volunteer citizen commission, and expecting them to show up for multiple meetings. Sometimes we'd have 0 applications, sometimes we'd have 5 or 6. It can be taxing. So we want to make sure participation is attentive and they're able to provide valuable input. So we just don't have that number of applications necessary to warrant having a second meeting at this time.
Lisa?
Just a clarifying question for me. Hopefully I'm understanding this correctly. If Central Power were able to, make an agreement with the other landowners, this project could stay on schedule, or am I misunderstanding that?
Mayor Ross, Alderwoman Olson, that is my understanding of it as well. It's between the 3 property owners to figure out, or 3 interested parties to figure out how they want to record Lot 1 of the Mallard Substation subdivision and move forward with the project. We're, I believe, ready to issue a permit once we have the lot recorded and it's ready to go. As far as the city processes are required, it's this, transferring from person A to B and then B to C that's kind of creating an issue.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, if I can continue, this isn't much that the city can offer this evening, but my recommendation would be that the planning department give Central Power 48 hours extension on the deadline to see if they can work something out, because I know they do have a tight timeline. If they're able to do that, they're able to keep this project moving forward. Obviously, if they can't, there'll have to be some other avenue that they take to make this work. But if you would extend till, end of work day on Wednesday, I think that could possibly be helpful to them.
Well, excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. Can Central Power respond to that? Is that a possibility for you guys to go back and negotiate between the 3 parties?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Pittner, Councilman Pittner, excuse me. It is possible. The difficulty becomes when you enter into agreements with individuals, that's done for a reason.
I guess I just wanted to know if it had been explored at this point.
As far as going back to
Yep.
individual, it has not been done due to the complication of it, but I'll be exploring that avenue tomorrow. Councilwoman Olson, thank you for that. It would help in the event that the discussions between the three of us don't go well. So if you're willing to grant that, that would help a lot.
I don't think it needs to be in the form of a motion, does it? That's just a recommendation. Okay.
Thank you.
Very well, thank you.
We don't have to vote on that, it's just. Jonathan, that works for you?
Pretty pleased.
We got a thumbs up.
I just have a comment,
Carrie.
and it's something Jonathan brought up, and it has nothing to do with this. So public input is so important, and I want to remind all of Ward County, because I sit on the Ward County Planning Commission with Alderman Padragula, is we are in the middle of literally rewriting the entire county zoning. And that includes things like the minimum acreage requirements, minimum setbacks, all of this stuff. So, you know, we're taking the show on the road and going to be doing public meetings in the next 3 months. So please, like, if this is something that's important to you as a developer, as a farmer, as a resident of the county outside of the city, take a look at like the draft and come give public input, because again, we want to be accommodating of the needs of the county. And as Roscoe asked, right, it's sort of arbitrary, right? When we were sitting there coming up as a planning commission about how much, you know, there was no magic formula. It was like, oh, 10 acres, that sounds good. Like, so there, you know, there was sort of guidelines, but, you know, in the end, it was just us like saying, okay, that sounds good. So please, you know, pay attention if this means something to you, and look for those public hearings for the Ward County Planning Commission, and then ultimately the Ward County commissioners will be voting on the plan. So,
Thank you, Carrie.
my little public service announcement.
I promise I won't carry this any longer. One comment, and this is to do with Councilman Striley's comment. Just from an outside perspective, if you want to look at probably cutting down the process, in my experience, in our experience, that when we came to planning, and then it goes to city council on the preliminary plat, and then literally the exact same paperwork goes to city council for the final plat. So I think if you were to look at something as a council, you would look at that process between a preliminary plat and the final subdivision plat, where many things, almost literally nothing changes, but it just goes to that next meeting. I guess there may be an avenue of something there. And that was without a second council reading. That was just preliminary plat and to the final plat. So for what it's worth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to 9.1, or back up to 9.1. Harold, the floor is yours.
Mayor and council, staff has been working very hard on budget, as you've seen in multiple of the city manager memos and reports over the last several weeks. Before I get into this too much, I want to thank staff for the great work that they've done on this. Staff at all levels of the organization have been involved in probably some capacity within the budget, but particularly the department heads and the management team that have met and discussed this, and then finance director and his staff, Mr. Lakefield, and the hours that they've put into this. So in accordance with city ordinance, I am presenting the city manager recommended budget to the council for your consideration, and basically just go through some of the highlights. All of you should have the full budget in front of you, so you're welcome to delve into it as much detail as you would like to get into, but I'll be going over some specific highlights this evening with regards to the budget. So to kind of lay the foundation here a little bit, the city council has worked over the last 18 months with regards to developing your Magic City aspirations that you use to help make decisions to strengthen the community and make Minot a community that you can be proud of. And so If you recall, back in, was that early June, we had the strategic session with the city council at that time, and you developed specific goals underneath each of these aspirations. So just to give a reminder here of the different goals that you had outlined here, and I'm not going to read through them line by line. You guys set them so you know what they are, but they're also here and available to the public if they would like to see those. And so the management team has been working through and balancing the budget to help achieve these goals that the council has directed in conjunction with the Magic City aspirations that you have here. So all the city manager's recommendations, all recommendations in there tie back to these aspirations and these goals in some form or fashion. So getting into the 2023 budget, just a quick look overall. Had a budget of a little over $175 million in 2022. The current recommended budget is about $182 million. That's a difference of about $7 million or a 4% increase. And I'll go into the specifics of why here. But anytime I talk about budget, I always like to start with revenue. If you think of it, I mean, we have a pie chart here. So if you think of the budget as a pie, you can cut it into however many pieces you want or however big of pieces you want, but the pie always remains the same size. Unless you look at, in particular here with budget, if you look at increasing revenues, you can increase the pie a little bit, which allows you to take that into consideration. But here's some key highlights here. And the main thing I want to highlight here is in particular with regards to property tax. So the 2023 budget, only about 15.3% of our total budget is funded through property tax levy. I know a lot of the public focuses on property tax rates and those kinds of things, but when it comes to the operation of the city overall, it's a small piece of the pie, all things considered. Not to say it doesn't have an impact. It's something that we still are mindful of and pay attention to. But the property tax doesn't pay for everything. In fact, it only pays for about 15% of all the operations of the city. Compared to 2022, the proposed budget is a little bit more dependent on sales tax as a revenue, and I anticipate that will continue to increase over time. We have a lot that's funded within the budget through, let's say, like HUD and NDR funds, and as those get used up and those kinds of things, that becomes a smaller piece of the revenue pie, and therefore all the other pieces of the pie become a higher percentage within the overall budget. So that will continue to change a little bit, but we're not seeing a significant change here of 2023 over 2022. Now there's a couple of pieces that go into that, and a big chunk of that is just the change in assessed value. Well, we're in a very hot market right now when it comes to property and buildings, both on the residential and the commercial side. And that tends to be calculated into your assessed values. So the more a house sells for, the more the assessed value goes up. So, so a big chunk of this has to do with just the change in assessed value of 2022 to 2020, well, from 2021 to 2022. Difference of about just under $300 million in change in assessed value. So the good news means that people are paying more money for property in Minot, and you can sell a piece of property if you own it for a lot more, but also, unfortunately, that calculates into what the market value of your home is, and our assessed value is tied directly to market value. So overall expenditures, you know, if you divide it into the three main categories of what we provide as far as city services, that being general government, public safety, and highways and streets, you can see that a bulk of our expenditures go towards supporting public safety, police and fire service. About 23.5% goes towards general government, and then you have about another 28% that goes towards infrastructure, roads and highways. So in the mill levy, right now the city manager budget is recommended with about a 1.4 mill levy increase by state law. This would be the preliminary budget. So we're required to submit that preliminary budget to the county, and then letters go out to all property owners within the county and the city limits. And by state law, we are not able to ask for a mill levy increase more than that. It can be reduced as the council moves forward in finalizing their budget, but it cannot be increased above that. So if you were to I like to break this down into a home value of about 100,000 because that's easier to calculate. Most people know what the value of your home is. So if you have a $250,000 home, you can multiply that by 2.5, and that can calculate out what the difference is. But you're looking at about, with the current city manager recommended budget, it would be an increase of about just under $7 a year per 100,000 of evaluation in the property. And I'll go into a little bit here on some history, and I'll talk a little bit about why I'm recommending that with some potential alternatives and changes at the end with some last minute information that came in over the weekend. So if you look at our property rate history and collection, this shows what the total property tax collections are, and then compared with the mill rate. So it isn't always necessarily guaranteed that raising the mill rate is going to result in more revenue to the city, but typically it follows that pattern somewhat. But you'll see here, since 2020, the mill levy has been maintained flat, and we've maintained a fairly flat revenue from property taxes in our budgets. Last year, it was the will of the council to keep the mill levy flat in anticipation and hopes that the school bond issue would be passed for the second high school, which was successful. And obviously, there's a lot of consternation within the public with regards to the burden of property tax. That was also collaborated in our community survey, and those are elements that we took into consideration as staff in preparing the city manager recommended budget. Another big piece of revenue to the city has to do with sales tax. And this is just a reminder, I know that the council is aware of this, but this is a reminder of the breakdown of where those 2 pennies go towards with regards to sales tax revenues. So you have a significant amount going towards flood control and NAWS, and then we have some that goes into the Magic Fund with regards to economic development, and tax relief is some of the money that we transfer from sales tax into the general operations of the city to alleviate any potential pressure onto increasing property tax rates. And we also use the sales tax to pay for a lot of improvements and capital infrastructure projects, which is no exception this year in this year's budget as recommended by me and the staff. Here's a side-by-side comparison similar to what we just presented with regards to property tax, but this time looking at sales tax. Minot has been very successful as a region with regards to sales tax, starting to rebound a little bit from COVID. So we did increase our sales tax projections by almost $2 million for next fiscal year. And again, that goes back to how much people are spending money in town and how that's collected. Some other revenues, one of the directions from council back in June was to look at other potential revenues that support operations outside of property tax and sales tax. So here's a brief synopsis of what's included within the city manager recommended budget. Currently, there is no recommended change to garbage collection. Those rates are recommended to stay the same. You'll see the asterisks there. We have been talking about recycling, and that'll be a subject matter coming to the council and to the public here in the near future as we look at standing up the recycling program, and that can have the balance between recycling and garbage is important for recycling to be successful. So those are some things that we'll be deliberating here in the future with some recommendations from staff for council consideration. So I do give the one caveat, we're not proposing any increase in garbage collection fees, but that's subject to discussion with regards to recycling. With regards to the landfill, the only recommended change there has to do with commercial tree with a $7 increase per ton there. There are no recommended increases with regards to water rates and fees on either the residential or the commercial side. In sewer rates, there is some recommended. We have been subsidizing our sewer operation fees from the water fees a little bit, and they should stand alone. So there is a recommended change here of a 37-cent increase to the flat rate and a 16-cent increase to the 100 cubic feet for residential. And then same flat rate increase for apartments and commercial and government, and then an 18%, not 18%, but 18-cent increase on 100 cubic feet there. No changes recommended for industrial. Storm sewer rates, there's a recommended change there on the maintenance charge of 79 cents. and a development charge of 57 cents. Another key component within my recommended budget this year, we've been spending a lot of money building flood mitigation infrastructure, partnerships with the federal government, the state. We have a significant contribution if you refer back to the slide I had earlier with regards to the 2 cents of the sales tax and how much is going towards flood mitigation. We're investing a lot of money for protection of our citizens within the community, but we've been spending all that money on construction. We have not been setting money aside for maintenance of that infrastructure, and we need to begin developing a plan on how we're going to fund maintenance and having a reserve fund for capital maintenance and repairs to that infrastructure as it ages over time. So it is recommended that the council budget $460,000 towards that effort in 2023. We have budgeted for that to be paid for through sales tax in this upcoming fiscal year. But that also pins conversation for the council on what's the best way to fund that. There's a few different options that we'll talk about in the future, and that will be whether that is best done through a mill increase on general property tax, or whether we create a utility fee that's tacked on to water and sewer bills for that, or whether that's paid for continuously through sales tax. There's pros and cons to each of those, but that is something that staff will need direction from council on. But I do think it's imperative that we begin building some of that funding in so that we can continue to maintain this infrastructure. The last thing we want to have happen is whenever the next event happens and the infrastructure fails because it wasn't properly maintained. Kind of defeats the purpose of spending all this money and building the infrastructure. So we do want to make sure that we protect the citizens by continuing to maintain that properly, and we're going to need financial resources in order to be able to do that. So with that, here's some key highlights of the 2023 budget that's being recommended to you, and I wanted to go over some of the challenges that were accounted for as we went through trying to figure out how to balance all this and make it all work. First of all, is we had a salary survey done to make sure that the wages for city staff continues to be competitive and that we can continue to be an employer of choice within the region. We've seen significant inflation on multiple categories, and I'll highlight some of these here in the next slides. But like fuel costs and those types of things, healthcare costs, I'll talk about that here a little bit more. Last year, when we balanced the budget, staff had done a good job and hadn't spent all of the money that council had allocated to staff, and we had used $2.9 million in savings from fiscal year 2021 to help balance the 2022 budget. But we also tightened that up quite a bit, and so the budget this year has been more accurate and has been more on target, and there won't be that $2.9 million of non-expenditure to help balance next year's budget. In fact, that's down to about just over $600,000 to help this year, which means we have to get more serious on making sure that the budget is sustainable going forward. And then also increased street maintenance costs, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So 10-year salary survey, just to highlight some here. There's about $1.4 million in employee salary adjustments. Of that, $711,000 is just the normal raises that we give as far as step increases for employees as they continue to work here. You have salary ranges, and we budget every year for pay raises in accordance with that policy that the council's put in place. With the 10-year salary survey, to keep the wages competitive, it's about another $550,000 of adjustment. And then we also have about another $130,000 with regards to anniversary and career ladder adjustments and those kinds of things that help us be attractive to employees coming to work for us and applicants. Now, of that $1.4 million, about half of it comes out of the general fund, the other half comes out of our enterprise funds, like the water and sewer funds and those kinds of things. We have a lot of employees that are paid for through those funds, and they pay their share of that. So not all of the $1.4 million comes out of property tax. A lot of it, half of it is paid for out of those enterprise funds. Just a couple of notes here. So when the market rate adjustment came back, we had a couple of positions that were recommended for that were lagging in market competitiveness, then came back with recommended significant increases to those positions. The HR director scaled that back a little bit. So these are the three positions that were highlighted here, and I just wanted this to be available to the council and to the public. So within our IT staff, the market rate adjustment came back significantly higher, at about 18% under market. 18% is difficult to adjust to and swallow. So the HR director recommended a 10% market adjustment for those positions. That 10% is built into the city manager recommended budget. The airport director, which we just hired, that position, the pay range for that is about 20% under market. Again, the HR director recommended a 10% increase there. That 10% is built into the city manager recommended budget. The city manager position came in at 14% under market, which I guess that means that you're getting a good deal with me at the table. But the HR director recommended a 10% increase, but I cut that in half, and I'm recommending only a 5% increase for my position within my recommended budget. So with regards to general fund expenses, again, this is just a reminder here of the three different categories and where all the funding goes towards and what services it supports and the percentage of the budget that those are. But as we get in, I'm going to go back here again and talk about the next challenge, and that was inflationary impacts and those kinds of things. So with regards to fuel, I think we've all felt the pressure at the pumps, particularly if you're traveling this summer across the country. So we saw an 87% increase in our budget with regards to unleaded fuels, a 97% increase with regards to diesel fuel, and then natural gas and electricity utilities, we saw a 15% increase. So all those increases are built into the city manager recommended budget. I know there's been some concern with regards to, from council with regards to the number of budget amendments, so we're trying to make sure that we're budgeting this as accurately as we can, so we don't have to come back for budget amendments in the future. And so we're trying to adjust for that. Health insurance premiums, this is a bit of a educated guess. We don't get good numbers with regards to health insurance premiums until late July, which makes it difficult in preparing the budget. So we assumed a 10% increase. So we built a 10% increase for health insurance into the budget. And I'll highlight that here a little bit more towards the end, because we did have some information come in over the weekend with regards to that. So I'll talk about that's potential impact to the budget here at the end. Street maintenance. This is one that was a high priority out of the community survey. Very clearly a high priority. And so I have recommended an increase of $2 million for funding for road improvements, for preventative maintenance and replacement and all those kinds of things. If you remember correctly, the city engineer, based off of all of our studies, recommends that we should be spending about $12 million a year in road maintenance. This current fiscal year that we're in right now, I think we budgeted about $5.5 million. So this $2 million increase would take it to $7.5 million, which is still well shy of the $12 million, but it is progress towards it. The challenge we have there, and I'll talk about this too with regards to recommended positions, is I don't have the staff manpower to handle another $2 million worth of projects. And so two of the positions I'm recommending be funded this year tie back to be able to deliver on this investment into road infrastructure. I already talked about the fewer rollover of savings of expenditures. 2023, we are recommending about $1.49 million of reserves to be used for street improvements, nuisance abatement, and sidewalk projects. This budget also includes a new downtown bus depot. We have about $500,000 budgeted for that. Now this is 80% covered by federal and state funding. So it's actually closer to probably about a $2 million project, but we have $500,000 budgeted. This would be in one of the parking garages near the city hall downtown. And would help consolidate that and bring the bus traffic downtown, make it easier to get downtown through our buses. And again, we have about 80% of that being paid for by the federal government and the state transportation department. In June, council directed staff to prioritize replacement of equipment over adding new positions. So my recommended budget does follow that directive from the city council. We've been proactive with equipment. We did not cut any requests for vehicle replacements or capital improvement projects in the budget that were requested. Those are all built into the budget. So connecting to city council aspirations, again, here's a reminder of your goals here. Here's a little bit of a reminder of what the priorities were coming back from the community survey. You'll see there again, streets and sidewalks were very high priority. Quality of police services was a high priority. And then you also have code enforcement in there. So in order to help meet those objectives, those aspirations and goals that the council's provided and the community survey results, the city manager recommended budget does have 23 new positions added into it, 14 of which comes from the general fund. So the first one being is a public outreach specialist. This was a request by the police department. We talked about this last year in last year's budget and potentially the needs of both the fire department and the police department for this. This ties back to the goals of the aspirations with regarding to increasing community engagement and increased diversity inclusion, maintaining a constant and accurate flow of information from the city, and maintain current levels of public safety even if more resources are required. I've recommended in funding this position underneath our PIO officer. The main justification for that would be is I want to make sure that we maintain a consistent message and voice from the city. I want to avoid siloing. I can't really afford to give every department their own PIO officer. So in the time being, I want to keep that consolidated. And then I want to make sure that both fire and police department have access to that resource going forward here for the next year. I want to try that out and figure out how that goes, work closely with both chiefs and our PIO staff. This would be a position that would be dedicated to public safety though. And so we make sure that they get the training and that they need to specialize in helping the police department and the fire department reach out to the public and communicate more effectively. And we'll follow the direction of both chiefs on how to do that. Also recommending an addition of an IT technician. Especially with COVID, we've become more dependent on technology and software, and staff does not have the manpower to keep up with a lot of that. And so we need to add some more horsepower with IT, especially as we become more reliant. Most of our efficiency mechanisms that we'll be talking about in the future over the coming years will be very heavily dependent on technology, and having staff to make sure that technology works is going to be very critical. Back to public safety needs, I've recommended several public safety positions be included in this year's budget. One is a drug task force investigator. I attended a presentation recently that the State Highway Patrol organized and put together, and Chief Klug was there as well, talking about the opioid crisis and the impacts it's having, and the numbers and the increases that's happening are pretty staggering, and I think that's an area that we need to put more attention towards. And so I've recommended an additional investigator on the drug task force to help with that situation. Recommending an assistant PSAP manager. This is
way back over there.
This is on our dispatch side of things. We have a pretty heavy workload right now with only one manager who sometimes has difficulty getting times for vacations and personal time off and those kinds of things. It's a very demanding profession. You need some time to recharge. In addition, as we transition to the new city hall, the new dispatch center, we'll have more kiosks, which means more staff. We added 2 new dispatcher positions in the budget last year. So the amount of staff to supervise has increased, and more management is needed to be able to maintain the viability of those services. I've also included an additional police officer position in the budget. And then we have 3 firefighter positions. This is tied back to station number 5. Station 5 is under construction, will open up for service next year. We need staff to be able to respond out of that station. And so the fire chief has requested three new firefighters to staff that station. We also have the new city hall coming online, which means additional facility maintenance requirements. So not only do we have to continue to maintain the current facility we're in, but we have to maintain the new one. This was also discussed last year as part of the budget process with the council. Council approved 1 of 3 positions to be filled this year. That was the senior property maintenance position. So there are 2 property maintenance positions recommended to help with that. One of those being paid for out of the general fund and one being paid for out of the parking ramp enterprise fund. Recommending 2 new bus drivers. Last year we talked about reorganizing the bus routes across the city. Currently we have 3 routes and the need to add a 4th route, taking into account the new high school on North Hill and the potential and the soon to be opening a new hospital and all the development that'll happen out on the southwest side of town. So in conjunction with the new bus depot and then the creation of the 4th bus route, we need 2 new bus drivers to be able to run that 4th bus route. Again, this is significantly funded by the federal government and the state, so that is not a full investment of the city out of the general fund, but we do have 50% that we need to pay for out of that. Or is it 20%? Maybe it's 20%.
No, I can't see that.
I also included a request for a project civil engineer and an engineering technician 2. Again, this goes back to that previous slide with adding $2 million in road investment. I need staff to be able to design that and make sure it gets built properly. And these 2 positions will be able to help do that. Another significant request I'm making this year is the creation of an assistant city manager position. This would be 50-50 funded from the general fund and the enterprise funds. We need some more executive management to help pay attention to the big picture and planning, to help gain efficiencies between departments that would fall underneath the direction of the assistant city manager. This would also be a piece in succession planning with regards to the potential public works director's retirement that will be coming up soon. The public works director helps with some significant projects with regards to NOS and flood control, and helping continue to help transition this knowledge into someone else to help that transition be as smooth as possible. I think will be an important role for the assistant city manager. We also need to begin preparing for becoming a CDBG entitlement community, which means we won't have to compete for CDBG funds anymore. We'll have some directly allocated to us from the federal government. And that's in addition to finishing up our HUD and NDR projects with the 3 allocations that we have from there. But we need to figure out what programs we're going to run with that entitlement funds and then come up with plans on how to staff and run those programs that I would like to put underneath the assistant city manager. Also, our public works department is very big. It's our biggest department, and the public works staff and I both agree that it's probably time to begin separating that out a little bit and dividing that up, flattening out the organization, because we have a lot of departments and services reporting to one position. Not to mention that we'll have some increased workload here with the NOS project coming on board and with potentially running the biota plant. And then the flood control and getting geared up for preventative maintenance for that, and seeing the construction of those projects over the next 12 to 20 years to make sure that those get completed properly and timely. Over there on the right, you'll see how this position ties into the aspirations and the goals that the council has directed. And this position will be very key in multiple facets of helping accomplish that, in my opinion. So in concept, this is what the structure would be underneath the assistant city manager. HUD CDBG would report to the assistant city manager. The community development department would report to the assistant city manager. Public works would be divided into 2 different categories. Again, this is all conceptual, subject to potential change, but this is the concept. We would parcel out the functions underneath the public works department that would be considered wet utilities or utilities that are built out. So the water plant, the water distribution pipes, wastewater, the landfill sanitation. We also need to start constructing and building staff with regards to recycling collection and figuring that out. And then also the NAS biota plant in partnership with the state as the NAS water comes in. Right now, the model and the intent is that the city of Minot would operate the biota plant. So separating those out so they report to one director, which would then be subject to the assistant city manager. The remaining public works services would remain with the public works director position. It would also take on the flood mitigation aspect. And then you have the other services such as cemetery, transit, the maintenance shop, property maintenance, streets, stormwater would all be underneath that director. And then engineering and traffic would also be underneath the assistant city manager. Again, the assistant city manager would be able to help make sure that there are efficiencies gained between these departments. They work very closely together, often very involved in similar projects. And the assistant city manager will be able to provide the executive direction to make sure that there's efficiencies there and resolve any challenges or issues between the departments. Moving on to enterprise fund positions. So we're moving out of the general fund and into enterprise funds. Public Works has asked for an additional engineering technician 2 and a couple of light equipment operators. These would help with Public Works administration and within the storm sewer division to help keep projects moving forward and meeting needs there. Also, funding of 2 heavy equipment operators. Again, as we've acquired property for flood mitigation, we have a lot of properties that have to be mowed and maintained. It's become very burdensome. We've tried to split that out with our street staff and all of our staff, really, and it's gotten to a point that we need a couple more heavy equipment operators. Again, these positions were requested last year but not funded. And these 2 positions would be funded, if approved by council, out of that $460,000 from the sales tax until council determines a more sustainable funding mechanism going forward.
Could you repeat that?
Sure. So the 2 heavy equipment operators are currently proposed to be funded through sales tax. We had $460,000 out of sales tax to come in and fund this, but that's pending future conversation of the council on a more sustainable financing mechanism on that, whether that's as a utility fee or a property tax mill levy increase dedicated towards flood mitigation maintenance, or even potentially carved out of sales tax revenues for the future. So if council doesn't approve that $460,000, then you're also eliminating these 2 heavy equipment operator positions from the budget. In addition, we're asking for 3 plant operators. This is getting geared up for the operation of the biota facility. These would all be funded through the federal government. So the city would be a pass-through for funds. Those positions and all the maintenance fees of the biota plant would be paid for out of an account. So there's no general fund impact and there is no impact to our water rates to fund these positions. These would be funded 100% from the federal government. But we do have to budget them and put them in our budget, and they would be city employees. And then we're also asking for 1 additional plant operator to help with our current water facility.
Mark Janser? Or Derek, can you mute his mic?
I think I'm going to hang these on here and away I go. Thanks. 6:30. 6:30. Yep.
Is Derek back there?
I think so. Okay. So as part of the council tours in preparation for budget this year, we took you through the new water plant. You can see that we've basically doubled in size our water plant facility. And again, just like adding the new city hall, we need more help in properly maintaining that facility. So I'm almost done here. So what's the impact? Again, proposing about a 1.48 mill levy increase. That's absorbing all of those things that I talked about, adjusting for the market rate analysis for employees, the increase in operational costs, the 10% potential cost in health insurance premiums and all those kinds of things. So this comes in just under $7 a year for $100,000 of assessed value. A reminder here again about what all entities go into property tax. The city of Minot is not the only one who collects property tax. We do represent about 36% of that. Right now, the Minot Public Schools is about 32% of that, although that's subject to change as they put in the impacts of the bond issue that was passed by the voters this last spring. Ward County is about 17.5%, and then you have the Minot Park District, which is also about 13.6% of the property tax bill. So again, 1.48 mills. With current assessed values, it's estimated that each mill increase generates $226,000 of revenue to the city. So the 1.48 mill increase is about $335,000 that we're asking for from the citizens. Again, comparing back on our reliance on property tax and sales tax, we are becoming a bit more reliant on sales tax, which is fine. That the reliance and the balance between property tax and sales tax varies across the country. But having that balanced out is probably advisable, but we are using sales tax to pay for a lot of what's proposed in our current recommended city budget. Again, a reminder of the council's aspirations and the goals you've outlined underneath those. I believe the city manager recommended budget helps accomplish all of these goals and objectives that you have outlined, and I haven't recommended anything that doesn't help accomplish those goals. Some future considerations with regards to financial sustainability of the City of Minot as an organization. One potential is currently we're only using 2 cents of the sales tax. I think by state law we're allowed to go up to 3. We get about $11 million per penny. Not necessarily recommending that we go for a full cent, but it may behoove the council or the community to begin considering maybe a 1/4 cent sales tax or a 1/2 cent sales tax or some of those kinds of things to help decrease the dependency on property tax to help fund these, especially as we start talking about flood mitigation, which, segueing into that again, we need to find a more sustainable financial model to maintain the flood mitigation infrastructure that we're building, both in the ongoing annual operation, but also beginning to build a reserve fund for it specifically so that as we have high cost repairs that need to happen, simply as things get old, that we have money in place to be able to do that. I also think it's important, we talked about assessed values. There's high demand right now and low supply, which is going to continue to push assessed values up. And I think it's important that we try to grow our tax base, and we need to find some ways to help alleviate some of that pressure on our housing market and to help with workforce. We also have the Minot Air Force Base missile project overhaul coming up here in the next 10 years that we're going to see, 4,000 to 6,000 workers coming in to work on that. That's going to put some significant pressure on our housing market. And then we need to continue to maintain affordability within our community. And right now, the current budget doesn't really have a whole lot addressing any of that. We also talked at the last council meeting with regards to the potential of transitioning electrical inspections from the city to the state. And if the council was to choose to do that, that's about $195,000 in savings. Currently, the city manager recommended budget has these 2 positions funded by the city, leaving that opportunity if the council chooses to retain that is built into the budget. But if you choose to make that transition, that's $195,000 that can be allocated to other priorities that the council sees fit. We do have a meeting later this week, touching base. Staff and I have a meeting with representatives from the state to see how that's going. So we'll be reporting back to the council with regards to that with a recommendation from staff of as whether or not that transition should occur or not, based off of staff's opinion for consideration of the council at a future council meeting. So before I get into questions, as soon as you finalize a document, it doesn't take very long before changes come in, and that is the case here. So over the weekend, I have a few last minute considerations. One, I wanted to give a reminder at a previous council meeting, council approved to reduce the general fund supported community contributions by 5% and also declined to fund Project B. So I wanted to provide a reminder here of what the financial impacts were on that. So you have that slide in a concise place for you to look at. A reminder here again, going over the positions. So I recommended 23 positions be funded. There was 35 requests that, and we did not fund all of them. So I wanted to provide for you a summary here of all the positions that are recommended either on the general fund or the enterprise fund side, but also that you have a list here of the positions that were requested that were not funded. And then a quick weekend update here to sound like Saturday Night Live here. So over the weekend, we did get notification with regards to health insurance premiums. Again, if you remember earlier in my presentation, we built in a 10% expectation of premiums. Well, we got information back that we're actually looking at a 2% decrease in health insurance premiums. So that is good news. It's a savings of about $600,000. So we have $600,000 built in the budget for health insurance premiums, which is not going to occur. Now, in conversation with the finance director and I, we do recommend at least keeping it flat so we can add a little bit more money towards our health insurance reserves. But that $600,000 is that decrease in 10%. So we're not recommending a decrease of 12% out of the budget. We're recommending potentially pulling that 10% out, but leaving that 2% in so that we can bolster our health insurance reserves a little bit more, because there's no guarantee that we'll continue to see this trend of savings, and we may need healthier reserves to handle claims histories in the future. But what can the council consider to do with those funding? Again, we have the $600,000 in savings with regards to the 10% in health insurance. Should the council move forward with transitioning the electrical inspectors from the city to the state, you have about $790,000 of money there that can be reallocated in some other fashion. So here's a summary of some things that the council could consider that were not included in the city manager recommended budget. Council could consider restoring the 5% cut in the community funding. That was you previously directed staff to do. You could consider adding in funding for Project B. You could look at adjusting the mill levy down. So we could approve the budget and include all of the city manager recommended budgets and still leave the mill levy flat or even potentially decrease. You could also begin setting aside money for other upcoming priorities for the council. That would include wayfinding signage. My city manager recommended budget does not include any funding towards wayfinding signage. Also, we talked earlier in the council meeting with regards to the space needs analysis and feasibility study for the Municipal Center and what will happen with this current city hall. Once it transitions into a police department, we will need money to execute whatever the council decides with the results of that feasibility study and transition either this building or some other suggestion that will meet the needs of the police department for the foreseeable future. So it would be probably advantageous to begin putting some money aside when we can to have that money available to us for us in the future. And then also we have several positions that were requested. And I will put a caveat here that I did not believe that any of those positions were fluff positions. I believe they were all needed positions. But at the end of the day, I tried to follow the council's direction not to add positions. And so I tried to tie all those back to the directives of the council and the community survey. But should council choose to, there is money that if you wanted to add, if you believe some of those positions are needed, there would potentially be some money based off of the health insurance savings, et cetera, that you could consider putting some of those positions back in. And then final slide is just a recap of what's next. So at the August 15th, we will have the council president's budget recommendation from Alderman Pittner. September 5th, we will have on the agenda for budget Q&A. That's an opportunity for council to ask any questions of staff or Alderman Pittner with his recommended budget as you determine what you want to approve as a final budget. I will also add here, I included in my city manager report for the memo, but another thing we'll be implementing is a couple of online question and answer sessions with myself, the finance director, and key department heads. So that'll be an opportunity for the general public to log in, ask questions, and we'll provide a response. That way it's just another way that we're trying to engage with the public with regards to the budget process. Right now, as it's slated, September 19th would be the first reading for council's budget. And then October 3rd council meeting would be the second reading and final action of the council to approve, with a requirement of submitting the final budget to the county by state law by October 10th. So with that, there's a long-winded presentation with regards to the city manager's recommended budget and all it includes and what was considered as part of that. Again, you have the full meaty details in your preliminary budget that's prepared for you. And if you have any other information that you need, or I'd be happy to answer any immediate questions that the council has now.
I will open it up for questions. Any questions?
Just a quick question, Harold. Can you get the newer presentation to Michaela so she can swap it out for the agenda?
Yes. Yes, we'll have the new updated with all the new slides up available. I'm going to guess Derek might even have that done by the end of today.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, one small clarification. September 5th is Labor Day, so the first council meeting in September is September 6th. So just one small correction. I don't want anyone to be here on the 5th with an empty room. So.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments, questions? Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment, and obviously we're going to have a lot of time to discuss all the information that's been given to us, but I know that the community is concerned about some property tax increases based on the approved bond vote to build our second high school. But I think it is imperative that we take care of the city. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that property taxes are going to increase, but we are elected to represent the city and take care of the needs of the city. I think that this proposed budget takes care of that. It might need some tweaking, we'll find out, but we are still elected to represent the city, and I think that's the mindset that we have to use as we approve this budget.
Thank you. If not, do we accept a motion to nothing? Nothing? Okay. No further comments? Then let's move on to item 10, adjournment.
Just something under additional items on the agenda. I just wonder, be curious, just with the budget and the process, I would like to direct staff. Back in October 1st, 2018, we approved moving forward with implementing the IDC report. I'd just like an update on that. Maybe some of the things that have come out of that report, where that report's at. I know there are 70 some odd deliverables from that report. Just get an update on some of those things that we're tackling and where we're moving economic development on the city's front moving forward, and future ideas being worked on. And then beyond that, point of privilege, it's my thirdborn's third birthday. Clementine, happy birthday, and I'll be home for cake soon. So.
Mr. Lakefield.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize for keeping everyone here, but I think the recommendation is to approve the preliminary budget, and we do have to submit the budget to the county here in about a week. And there are some constraints imposed by adopting the preliminary budget. We cannot go up from here, we can only go down. So it does impose some limitations on the council for the remainder of the budget.
Thank you, Dave. That's what I sort of thought. Roscoe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, obviously we know it's going down already with the health insurance piece. So, I mean, we're submitting a budget we know that's not going to be that number. I'd just soon see it be down, taking that out. Or is that not something we can do here? or I mean, putting it at flat, the health piece.
Like, this is at 1.4 right now. Mill levy, so you'd like to see that lower? Like, that's
I'd like to see the healthcare at 0, and then back the number into whatever that, the exact dollar amount into that.
So point of clarification. So if you deduct the 600,000 for the health insurance savings, you would actually be decreasing the mill levy. Because again, it was at 220,000 per mill levy. So you divide that by the 600,000 by that, and you're looking at probably about what, a 2.5 mil decrease, somewhere in that ballpark. So if I understand Alderman Straley's recommendation would be is to decrease that. So I guess again, as the finance director said, the city manager recommended budget, it was with a 1.48 mil increase. It can't go up, you can't go to 2, can't go to 1.5, but you can go down. I think Mr. Straley is recommending that, well, I guess I'll let him clarify whether he wants to recommend a flat, like no, keep the mill levy as what it was approved for this fiscal year, or whether he wants it to be decreased, netted the health insurance savings of the 600,000.
Well, I guess I'm more concerned with the dollar amount. The dollar amount's almost a $1.8 million increase on the property taxes. The mills, I'd rather work in dollars because people understand dollars. So, I mean, yeah, it's a 1.45, but it's really a $1.8 million increase when you take the valuation piece into it, which we forget at times.
So do we need a recommendation? Do we need a motion?
Just to be clear, that $600,000 reduction that came in over the weekend is not reflective in this document?
It is not. So the current budget as recommended with the 1.48 mil increase was an increase in property tax of about 300 and something thousand. It was on one of those slides I presented earlier. So if you decrease it to 600,000, you'll be decreasing the mill levy overall, which would, according to Mr. Straley's point, would also adjust for the increase in assessed values, but your mill levy would be less.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to see it at 0, and then, that's a half of the savings roughly if you go to 0, but I'd like to see that at 0 so we can't go up and we could final budget go down.
I have a motion.
Carrie?
I'd like to make a motion, because we can decrease it, to move forward with the 1.4 and work on getting that lower, but that will be our ceiling as 1.4.
So a motion by Carrie to have it at 1.4 mil levy
Right,
increase?
that's the city manager recommendation, correct? And that would be the ceiling.
1.48.
Yeah, whatever, yep.
Okay. That would be the ceiling, and then
as we, get through things, right, like, of course, we all want to get it as low as we can, but I just don't want to tie our arms, right, and going someplace and then figuring out something else, so that's just my motion, so.
I would second that for conversation.
any discussion? Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Lisa.
I think that the whole process is set out so that we can discuss it. We've been given a lot of information tonight, and we need to digest it. The community needs to digest it, and I think that we're premature in making cuts now. We may get to that point, but that's why we have the process set in place so that we can make the most informed decision that we can.
Thank you, Lisa. Anything else? Any other comments? If not, call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
His mic is muted.
Derek, can you unmute him or no? No, can't. Okay. Olson?
Yes.
Pittner? Yes. Padragula? Did you mute him too?
He's gone.
Gone. Ross?
Yes.
Straley?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Now let's jump to item 10, adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Pittner, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.